Okay.
Can
All
you
right.
record?
Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to be here, and especially we're honored to have Professor David Passig with us. I want to thank Salman Ben Dayan for helping to organize this event, and Avi Mamie and others who thought of it. We've had Professor Passig many times in the past. He came and spoken here. He's a good friend of ours. And in the past, he's spoken about precisely what's going on today. I know last time you were here, you spoke about Russia and China and Israel. And we always have your words in mind as we read the news and watch things unfold. Professor Passig is a professor of future studies at Bar-Ilan University, head of the department. He wrote many books, including The Future Code. What he does is he looks beyond the news headlines. Most of us, we just read what's going on. But Professor Passig is looking at trends, looking at data, big data, small data, thinking about the psychological motivations of leaders and nations, and putting together all of that data. So it's no magic here. It's just using a lot of insight to help us. And this is a time when a lot of us feel confused, so many things going on, and to get some clarity, some direction, some idea of what we can hope for, what we should worry about, and then maybe what we can do to bring about a better outcome. So Professor Passig, we're so honored. Thank you for joining us. Professor Passig will present first, and then he'll take questions. So please write your questions in the chat, and then he'll be happy to address them after. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. It's so nice to see a lot of faces over there. I'm really, thinking about the community also a lot, and I hope to see you again, from time to time. Anyway, let me try and first of all clarify my lenses, if you wish, with which I'm trying to understand reality. Reality is something so difficult to make sense of without a very clear methodology with which you at least perceive what you see and make sense of the dots, what you see.
Professor, 1 second. I can't see your picture, your video.
You cannot see me? Really?
I saw you before. Yeah, you were there before, but now I don't see you.
I see myself. Let's see what I can do.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Is it okay?
Yes, now it's good. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right. So, the most important thing in trying to understand reality is to be aware of the methodology with which you make sense of the dots and the huge amount of data that is now being gathered and described and published all over the world. So let me really briefly explain with which I'm going to describe what I'm about to share with you. Probably we have started a new epoch in history, which is another phase of World War II. It might sound very, general, but the methodology says the following. Humanity is going from time to time into aggressive actions among nations. And if you are able to see the connections between the dots, between those epochs of aggression, and make sense of that line, then you're able to foresee things that most of the people really don't think it's logical, and don't see how the past can be extrapolated into the future. So this is really briefly the idea that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to try and see history of the last century as just the introduction of the 21st century, because this is how history is evolving always. Nothing is detached from the past. The past is continuously evolving and taking shape, and from time to time we see it in different, let's say, historical events. So after this very brief introduction to the methodology, I would like to state the following. We have been in something like 80 years of an amazing, unusual experience in history. Generally speaking, humanity used to go with a paradigm for millennia. And that paradigm said the following: if somebody had some resources, that means I'm lacking those resources. And for millennia, people were fighting for those resources in order, of course, to make sure that their offsprings will benefit and will have better lives than they used to have. So for millennia, the pattern was the following. One group of people saw that the other group of people had something that they lacked, and they tried to get whatever they lacked, either by political venues and tactics, or by wars and very aggressive actions against those that used to have whatever they had. The pattern of those aggressions, generally speaking, was the following.
Okay, I think we lost him. We'll, I'm sure he'll log back in. Sorry about that.
Does he know? No.
Who's in touch with him? Maybe Salman have his phone?
Let's help the losers feel that they didn't lose anything. Okay, and this is actually the most important experiment that we have been experiencing in the last 80 years or so, in which we have developed a world system in which each nation can feel that nothing is lacking. They can be part of world economies. If they are lacking a resource, they can buy it from different places, different other nations. And the world has developed a system in which everybody can trade with each other through a very expensive platform that the winners have developed after World War II, in which the seas, the maritime trade routes are open, in which there are world institutes that somehow bring people to share ideas, to define rules, to bring their differences into understanding of each other without the need to go to the battleground to bring those differences in an aggressive way. This is the most important experiment that we have been experiencing after World War II. And that experiment was, of course, led by the US, that was willing to invest trillions of dollars to build that world platform, global platform, on which every nation can, trade with each other, world institutions, world trade organizations, in which everybody was able to share what they have and buy whatever they needed to. And during the last 80 years, humanity has gone from about 50 or so nations into about 200 nations nowadays that felt a great prosperity in a pace that we have never experienced in human history. And as you are all familiar with, most of the nations that benefited from that world platform, of course, were the nations that were the losers after World War II, and the small nations that most of the time in history were battled by great other powers. And what we see at the beginning of the 21st century, a platform that has gone amok, if you wish, because a lot of nations started taking advantage of that platform, not just to push away the leaders of that platform, but to overcome and take over that platform for their benefit and for their values and for their strength and benefit, etc., etc. And this is something that we have seen starting to collapse at the beginning of the 90s, because up to the 90s, the US was willing to invest trillions of dollars on that platform because of the tension that the Cold War with the USSR has brought into the world politics. After the USSR has collapsed, step by step, the US started understanding that a lot of other nations are taking advantage of that platform, and bit by bit, the US leaders were trying to retreat from that platform in order for others to take part of the burden of that platform. And for example, the US came to NATO to ask to be part of the system, etc., as you are all familiar with. What happened in the last few years is that platform probably has almost collapsed worldwide. And some nations not only are taking advantage of that platform, but are challenging that platform. And one of the landmarks of that challenge was when Russia invaded Ukraine, after signing with Ukraine a very clear treaty that they will not invade, after Ukraine actually gave back all their nuclear power that was part of Ukraine before the USSR has collapsed, and people started seeing that, or nations worldwide started understanding that from now on you cannot count on any international treaty. You cannot count on a nation that has, for example, wheat, and you rely on that wheat for feeding your people. You cannot anymore rely on that world trade system that will be able to share their resources. Even though they want to share their resources, they will not be able to continue sharing or trading with their resources. And what we see in the last 30 years actually is, bit by bit, that world system is step by step diminishing and almost collapsing. By almost collapsing, I mean that we are now at a stage in history in which groups of nations are forming alliances in order to take care of their needs. Everybody already understand that there will be times in which you won't be able to get your needs if something will go astray, or something will happen somewhere in the world, and the trade routes will somehow, by a small group somewhere, will be crazy to launch attacks on ships, etc. as exactly we see at the very moment in different places worldwide. I just came back from India, trying to understand the geopolitics of that area in order to, of course, make and establish the contacts in order to establish the new kind of alliances worldwide that will be able to tackle the challenges that the system that is collapsing will probably bring about in the future. And I was shocked to see how frightened they are. India is an amazing country. Actually, at the moment, they are the largest population on earth, and they have, I was told that they have about 100 conflicts that are surrounding India. And I was shocked to see how what happened in Gaza really affected their understanding of geopolitics. They told me that, look what happened to you just with 300 terrorists. What will happen to us if 3 million Pakistanis will decide to invade India, and those Pakistanis have nuclear power? So they are, nations at the moment are very afraid from the collapse of that multilateral and a global system in which, or through which, we were somehow able to bring our differences into somehow discussions and decisions without having to go to the battleground to make our point. So what we see at the moment is that the world is reorganizing itself in the manner we have organized ourselves before World War II. We see now a lot of groups of nations that are forming. The one that you are all familiar with in the Middle East is the Abraham Accords. But there are now at least something like between 10 to 15 different groups that are reorganizing themselves in clusters of nations in order to take care of their needs and take care, of course, of their conflicts if something, God forbid, will go astray in world affairs. So most of the people I'm aware of, and the studies I'm reading and the people I'm speaking with, most of them are saying that we have started about a decade in which the system as we have known it up to now will continue to erode, and it will have great implications on world trade and world organizations and wealth transfer, etc., etc. And the climax, and most of the people I'm familiar with are speaking that by 2027 or 2029, at best by 2035, there will be a climax in which the system will collapse, and that will be demonstrated by a very aggressive move that China will do with their alliances. So this is really briefly a lot of literature that I'm trying to condense in a few minutes. And the idea is to open the mind to see what might happen in the next decade. Some people are saying that we will be able to manage and fine-tune the world order as we have known it after World War II. We will have to do some changes in world affairs, in world institutes, and the sharing of the burden will be a part of many more nations worldwide. Some other people are saying that since it's a very chaotic time, nobody knows what will be the new world order that will emerge from the next decade. But the next decade, by all means, it will be very turbulent in many ways. And as we see it, you are all familiar what's happening worldwide. You see that in any place, almost any place you touch upon on the globe, you see that things are brewing. And this is a very clear indication that the system is in a disequilibrium state. And most of the time, when the system is in a mis-equilibrium state, the most unimaginable things could happen, and we know it from history. And the worst thing that can happen to us is to say that, well, we can manage as it used to be up to now. We can, continue what we used to do up to now. But many nations already have already understood that it's impossible to continue the way we've been doing business worldwide. And by business, I mean everything from trade to politics to agriculture, if you wish, everything, almost everything. I'm not sure you are aware of what's happening now in Europe, but last week the Prime Minister of Sweden, which was for about 200 years, Sweden was a nation that tried to be kind of Switzerland of those nations over there, but he has clearly defined that Sweden is about to go to war, and he started speaking about it out loud so that the populate of Sweden will be as much as possible ready for a new kind of aggression that probably will come from Russia. Most of the experts are saying that Russia will not stop in Ukraine, and their aim is, of course, Poland, and Poland is in a very frightening mindset at the moment. They are actually quadrupling their investment in technologies and preparation for war, which is really a sign that is ringing red and bringing a lot of people to try to understand how it might develop that mindset, even though some people think that no, nothing will happen, and even though Putin is saying that behind, after Ukraine, he doesn't have anything else to do, but nobody is believing him, as we have already seen. Even though before he has invaded Ukraine, he was clearly saying that he doesn't have any plans to invade the Ukraine, but nobody anymore believes in those statements. And that in one front. The other front, of course, is the Middle East that is in turmoil, and this is just at the beginning of a decade of aggressive, unfortunately aggressive, landmarks in which Israel will have to bring this conflict into somehow a definitive, clear-cut, end or finish, at least from point of view, from a military point of view. There are great attempts at the moment to stop that or to slow down that vector, but I'm not part of people that think it's possible at the moment. And we're going to see ups and downs in the Middle East. We're going to see ups and downs in the Far East, in the North Far East, in the South Far East. The world is really brewing, and there are some studies that are comparing this time to pre-World War II conditions, world geopolitics. I'm not sure it's exactly the same thing, but there are a lot of signs that are very, very much the same as before World War II. I'm not trying, to frighten anyone here, but the idea is to understand that one epoch of history probably has ended, and we have started something else. That something else is very hard at the moment to define. It's very hard to foresee how world order that is based on world low collective or international rule-based into, and how it's going to reshape itself. I'm part of the people that think that this is how humanity is constantly fine-tuning their system, and in between those epochs there's always a time that things are are not exactly positive, because the negative aspects of the previous world order are already clear to a lot of people, and we need to take care of those negative aspects of the previous world order. The previous world order, most negative aspect is probably the dominance of one superpower, at least in the last three decades. By all means, it's something that is not healthy to a system to have one dominant superpower. This is what drives other nations to counter about that sole superpower, and we'll see how things will evolve. I think that's enough for me for the last, I spoke about 30 minutes. I was very, very general, but if you have very specific things, I'll be very glad to answer as much as I can. And I hope I'll be able to contribute as much as I can. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Take some questions from the live audience here.
Go ahead.
Hi, Doc. Nice to see you, as always. Beautiful presentation. Quick. Yeah. Professor, first question is, how does population shifts, whether it's depopulation, birth rates going down, and immigration, play into all of this? Is that an important component to the unsettling in the world?
There are some experts that put a lot of weight on population. Actually what I'm trying to say is that there are some experts that think that about 80% of what's happening worldwide is just population. I don't think it's just population, but population is a very important variable. Okay, now if we are speaking already about population, we know that the world is going through what we call the demographic winter in the 21st century, which means that we are going to peak to 9 billion people by 2030, and then we might go back to 6 billion people by the end of the 21st century. China is going to lose about half of its population. China will go back to 700 million people. Okay, India is going to lose a third of its population in the next 30, 40 years, etc., etc. Okay, and most of the time when the population is shrinking, that's troubles. A lot of troubles inward and outward. And because that raises the fears of those nations. And the fears of those nations, especially if we are speaking about China, China has 3 main issues she has to address in order to somehow survive the 21st century as a superpower. One is food. China does not cultivate, doesn't have enough agriculture to sustain its population by all means.
Wow.
Okay, that's one thing. China doesn't have water to sustain its industries and its agriculture. That's the second issue. And the third issue is, of course, the tension that is being evolving around China, not just in its very closest nations, but also afar. You know, for the last 20 years, China was able to develop an image of a nation that comes to help, and bit by bit, nations start to understand it's not exactly help. This help has a very high price at the end, and there is a sentiment that is growing worldwide that China is not exactly what they were trying to develop, the image they were trying to develop in the last 20 years. So these are 3 aspects that they have to take care of, and I'm not sure they will be able to take care of. And at the midst of those transition times, most of the time in history, those kind of powers are becoming very much aggressive, especially because their ruling system is based on a dictatorship or different kinds of rulings that cannot bring a lot of ideas into the decision-making process, but everybody is afraid what the leader will say, and the information is not, and the data is not going up into the highest level of decision-making, and that brings a lot of miscalculations, as you have seen with Putin. That's exactly the pattern. You know, when there is a very dominant dictator, everybody around him is afraid of bringing new ideas. At the end, the miscalculations are augmenting, and the price is becoming dire for mistakes, as we are seeing now with Putin, and we are going probably to see the same thing with Xi Jinping. Most of the experts are saying that it takes many years for the data to come to the highest level of decision making. We have seen it in COVID. It took them 3 years to understand that their way to try and tackle the challenge was a disaster. And when they understood it after almost 2 years, not 3 years, it was already impossible to overcome the negative aspects. I'm not sure if you're aware how many people died in COVID in China. You know, if you ask the Chinese people, they will tell you about 5,000 people died in COVID. Okay, now we have clear evidence that about 135 million people died in COVID in
Wow.
China.
Whoa.
135 million people. Okay, and there are many ways to to measure, and there are a lot of evidence about that. And this is, by the way, they have already said that their population shrink by 80 million people, which is, you know, by itself something unusual. Okay, so, you know, the problem with that kind of dictatorships is that it takes them a lot of time to understand what's happening, to come up with new ideas to address, and even though they have an idea how to address the challenge, the miscalculations are most of the time too many to be able to somehow, you know, address them and come up with the new ways to overcome their negative outcome.
Professor, I have a question. Continue about the discussion on China. If and when China invades Taiwan, and they probably would win, the Taiwan being the biggest chip maker in the world, major chip maker, and if China controls all the chips, they could literally, I assume, bring down the economy of the whole world. Can you comment on this situation?
Okay, well, I'm part of the people that are saying that China doesn't have to invade Taiwan in order to bring havoc to that region. They just, you know, just input a blockade around Taiwan, and that'll be enough. They don't have to go and you know, there people are saying that in order to invade Taiwan, they will have to somehow pay a very dire price in terms of military service and personnel. A lot of studies are saying that they will probably have something like 1 million casualties.
Wow.
Just in trying to invade Taiwan. I don't think they will need to do it. That's one issue, but it doesn't matter. A blockade is worse, by the way, than invading Taiwan, because blockading Taiwan means that they will have access towards the seas of towards the U.S. Shores, which is much more frightening for the U.S. And they will have and the U.S. will have to address that blockade by aggressive means. That's one thing. The other thing is that at this very moment, many nations are already building the infrastructures in order to be able to develop, you know, the technologies that were concentrated in Taiwan and are still concentrated in Taiwan. India is taking a very important role, even though I think India will not be able to take that role, but the US is investing now a lot of money in order to bring back those industries inshore. But those kind of things are taking time. I believe you are all familiar with with what Biden did about more than a year ago, in which he said that everyone that is part of chip industries in China that is developing the chips that are smaller than 5 nanometers, okay, need to go out of China. And if you are a US citizen, your citizenship will be revoked. So the US is taking some very aggressive moves in that direction to be in a matter of about 5 to 7 years to be able to almost bring back those technologies and those infrastructures from Taiwan and dissipate them in different countries. We are here running on times. Most of the experts are saying that China will be ready for a very aggressive move by the year of 2027. Some are saying the year 2029. But I'm aware of a scenario that speaks about 2035. If it will be in 2035, that means that they are already devastated. They will not be able to do anything in at least from that perspective of chip manufacturing. I hope
Okay.
I somehow gave you a larger perspective of that issue.
Thank you. Okay, I have one question, Professor. Quickie. Well, what
Just
does the
remind
new
me your names. I'm,
Mar-
you know,
Morris Dweck? Hi. How are
oh,
you?
how are you? How's your kid?
Good, good.
He's still at the school?
Yes, yes.
Good. Tagid lo shalom.
Thank you. So I want to know about the nuclear capabilities that everybody has now, and we know the destructive power of that, and really that can really shake a lot of things up because a very small nation can do a lot of damage with their nuclear capabilities.
So what's the question? What's the question?
Does it go nuclear? Does it go nuclear in this?
Are we going to see nuclear power being used in our lifetimes?
I'm
who?
I'm part of a group that says that never in history, humanity has had a tool and did not use it, which means it's only a matter of time that somebody will use that devastating technology. Well, humanity has already used it in the past. Okay, it's not new. What we are stressing is that there are a lot of people that think that if two nations have nuclear power, there is deterrence not using that power. I'm part of a group of people that think this is a concept that might turn devastating for humanity if we'll stick with that concept. And we need to do as much as we can so that as few as nations will have that technology in hand. And this is a great challenge for Israel at this very moment. And this is the greatest challenge of Israel in the next decade, because it's not just Iran. It's not just Iran. After Iran, it's the Saudis. After the Saudis, it's the Egyptians. After the Egyptians, we're speaking even the Iraqis. And after the Iraqis, it's the Houthis. And it will be a devastating, slippery way that humanity can go through. If we will not be able to stop that tendency to acquire that technology, the nuclear technology, humanity is going to go through harsh times in the next 2-3 decades. And I hope that we will have the strength. I mean not Israel, I mean the world. And I believe that a lot of people need to be awakened to the danger I'm speaking at the moment about. The deterrence paradigm is something that might be devastating for humanity.
Let's take Professor. Let's take a question from the chat. Joe Shami asked, many politicians and people believe in an isolationist policy in America, What are the ramifications of that and the value of NATO to the USA?
Well, if that idea will mature in US politics, that will be a devastating thing to world economy, to world order, to everything in the next 2-3 decades. You know, the US has always debated that issue. How much nationalism, how much being they're not taking care of the world, how there is no way that the US can retreat from its policing role of the new era. If they will retreat, if the US will retreat, that means chaos worldwide. And that's what happened always in world affairs. You need a policeman by all means, so that the rule of law worldwide will somehow, you know, bring down tension, will be, you know, will. So, Bekitzur, the nations need a great power to police whatever the world order is at the time. And it doesn't matter which order it is.
We have a question from the audience here. What should Israel's strategy be to navigate in the coming years?
What a question. Israel has started, as I said, 10 years. No, let me say something. We have started an epoch of 3 up to 5 years of conflicts, military conflicts in our surrounding. That's if the world will not go through a geopolitical stress, as I have mentioned before. If the world will experience the tension I was trying to define earlier with China and Russia, etc., it will take not just 3 to 5 years, it will take about 10 years, because we are converging with other conflicts that are much more world geopolitical issues. So that's why Biden is so aggressive now with Israel to stop as much as possible the tendency, the vector that has started at the moment in Israel. But Israel cannot stop. That's another issue. Okay, but the US understands that the world has started a slippery road towards a global conflict. That conflict doesn't have to be, you know, with rockets, all of it. It can be economic, etc., etc. But nonetheless, it's a conflict. When the world is in a conflict, we are all paying the price of that conflict. If the world will somehow slow down the vector of the conflict, then Israel will be able to take care of its challenges during the next 3 to 5 years. It depends on internal politics also. Everything is slowing down and it's stretched because of internal politics, of challenges that we did not prepare ourselves for it, because we suddenly understood that we cannot rely on the US on a lot of things, that we need to start over a lot of our industries, and it takes time. And through those periods, there are ups and downs in the conflicts in our surroundings. But generally speaking, I believe we have started about 3 to 5 years of very tense times with ups and downs in terms of military activities. Okay, we are probably going to the north by June, at best September or October. And from there, it might be in different forms. It might escalate to a larger conflict. If it will not escalate to a larger conflict, then it will stretch the timeline to 5 years, and there will be ups and downs in the conflict with the North. I believe that the next stage of the military activities will not be with Hezbollah, it will be with Syria, very specifically about with all the military activities and sects that are situated in Syria, that the Iranians, of course, are preparing for that conflict. And with Hezbollah, it might take a year, but some are saying that in any case, Israel will have to take action by June or at best September, because about 100 citizens that live in the north cannot go back to their homes, and it will be very difficult politically to keep them, away from their homes longer than 6 months or so, or a year, and that will be devastating internally, politically. So there are here a lot of vectors that are converging, a lot of vectors that are colliding, and it's exactly the definition of what we call in systems thinking the calculations that might occur from different sides that make things much more difficult in the long run.
Thank you.
I was trying to be very general because I'm afraid to speak up some things. I hope you understood.
Are you afraid because of political situations, or because it's recorded?
No, because of who knows who's listening here.
I think we know everybody. It's a trustworthy audience.
I see somebody there. His name is Solomon, I think. I'm afraid from him.
Yeah.
Kidding. Okay.
We have a question on the chat. Before October 7th, the Obama and Biden administrations have been largely ignoring or even appeasing the Iranian regime, explaining that it was not vitally important to USA security. Instead, they needed to focus on Russia and China, which were more serious threats. Do you think that was a mistake? And will the United States now change its focus to try to neutralize Iran?
This is the typical mistake that great powers are doing in the pre-phase of world conflicts. They are trying to appease. They are trying to somehow, calculate things in a very, very prudent manner. And this is what brings greater challenges later on. And this is exactly what's happening to the US at the moment. It was a great mistake from my point of view, at least. If they were to be very clear at the beginning, then things will not, develop at it is developing at the moment. And what we're seeing with the Houthis are just one aspect of that mistake. Okay. And I believe that, more and more people in the establishment now in the US believe that they need to be very, very clear and very aggressive towards the Iranians. Behind the scene, they might continue, appeasing and try to bring things down. And the reason is the US itself is not ready for that conflict. The US also was part of the concept that, you know, you can appease, you can somehow understand, you can do politics, and politics will take care of those trends. And the mistake that is always repeating itself in history is that if a great power at the very beginning of a trend is very clear, then that trend tends to diminish and sometimes even dissipate in history. If it takes to a great power many years to react decisively to a trend, then it is impossible in the long run to you know, try and turn back the clock and not continuing doing those mistakes. Go ahead.
A question from the audience here. Will AI be a net positive or negative?
AI, okay. AI is another technology that everybody is afraid of, and they don't have to be afraid of. And the reason is the following. You know, we as a species, we do not accept our physical and mental conditions as a given. And we are constantly, for millennia, trying to push the envelope. You know, think about it. At the beginning, we said, wow, we are, you know, walking 3-4 miles an hour, running 6 miles an hour. That's nothing. Okay, and so we were genius enough to perceive that there is a piece of rock that is, you know, in a way can give us a little bit more speed in traversing space. Okay, I can just imagine how people were totally afraid from that technology. I don't know if you are aware of, but about 160, 180 years, when the railroads were at their very beginning, people were afraid of taking trains. And the reason was a lot of people are afraid of taking a train because they thought that our body cannot move in space, you know, 30 miles an hour, and our body will explode from just the movement in space. We are constantly afraid from new technologies. So for millennia, we were trying to push the envelope. In the last century, we even, you know, developed wings, and we conducted trade and wars, etc., with wings that we don't have. In the 20th century, we even pushed the envelope of our cognitive abilities. We said, our memory, that's nothing. I want a much, much larger memory of data. And then we said, it's not enough to have a great memory. We want the ability to analyze great amounts, huge amounts of data, and in order to make sense of that data. And we reached a point in which we have developed a language modeling. We are just mimicking. We are mimicking the way we speak, the way we draw. So we are just enhancing a little bit, pushing the envelope of our cognitive abilities, our speech abilities. But this is not the most important characteristic of our being, of our existence. The most important characteristic is our consciousness. The fact that when I know that I know is something unusual. There is no such a species on this earth that, as far as we know, that can do what I just said. When we don't know, we know that we don't know. when we know how valid what we know is our knowledge. This is something unusual, by all means, our consciousness. And we have just started, defining what is it exactly consciousness? What are the tools with which we can measure it? Where is it exactly situated? Is it in our mind? Is it in our heart? Is it in our body, all over? Where is it exactly? So every time we reach the point in which we have pushed our envelope, we let our technologies take care of that aspect of our physical and cognitive aspect, and we turned our attention to our next level of being, or next aspect of being. And we are at a time in which we are going to go through a very long time, to fine-tune our way to mimic what we call intelligence. But what really defines us as human beings are not our intelligence. It's our consciousness. It's our awareness of our intelligence. There are a lot of species, a lot of animals that are much more intelligent than you and me. But they are, as far as we know, they are not aware of their intelligence. Just by being aware of our intelligence, we reached a point in which you and me, at this very moment, from afar, speak, see each other, share ideas. No other species was able to do it because only our awareness of our intelligence and our way to validate our intelligence and our way to constantly push the envelope of our intelligence. But we are just at the verge of a new era in human evolution, in which we are going to pay attention, to put a lot of new efforts to redefine consciousness, to develop tools with which we can measure it, tools with which we can enhance it, like we have enhanced our memory and our analytical abilities. We will be able to enhance our consciousness. We're just at the very early stage of a new era in our development. And by the way, if you have mentioned it, I'm about to publish a book exactly about the next level of our consciousness, the next phase of how we develop our consciousness and the tools, and how it's going to shape new sciences and new technologies and our civilization. The 21st century and of course the 22nd century are going to be totally different from the 20th century, as the 20th century was totally different than the 19th century and of course the 18th century. And the most important characteristic of the 21st century is the understanding of what consciousness is, and understanding how we can further push the envelope of our consciousness.
Professor, you could just ask
that
AI
was,
to write,
too long.
you could just ask AI to write the book for you,
Yeah, sure, but it will be AI. It won't be me.
All right, we're running out of time. I want to conclude with two last questions, and I'll ask both of them together so that you can answer both. The second to last question is, Israel's feeling a lot of pressure towards a two-state solution. Is it viable? Can it work? What other solution is out there if not? And the last question, since publishing your book, 2048, which was published about 15 years ago, what developments have surprised you, and what did you get right? What did you get wrong?
I forgot already the first question. What was the first question?
Yeah, the two-state solution.
Oh, the two-state solution. Well, there is no rational prospects for another state in this region. Another state cannot be by all means a sustainable state that can take care of itself. It will always depend on Israel or on other nations that will contribute to that nation to just, take care of itself by terms of water, food, energy, everything. Okay? That's one aspect of the issue. The problem is that there is so much pressure on Israel to establish another state here in this region. And I don't believe, and I'm saying it with great, sadness, I don't believe Israel have the possibility to constantly, forever, push away that pressure. And we will have to somehow establish another state nearby Israel. What I believe in, which is, devastating, is that it will take some time and we will have to, again, take over that territory. If you wish, take a look at the pattern with Gaza, and that's what we're going to see in Yehuda v'Shomron also. But in a matter of 20 years, okay, at the end, though, I believe that there will be some concession, but it will be a concession that will be part of a larger peace accord in the Middle East. And we have started that trend already. Okay, the Abraham Accord is just one step. The other step is with Saudi Arabia, and we, at the end, let's say by 2060, 2070, the Middle East will be a bloc, an economic and political bloc, as many other blocs in the world. And Israel will be accepted by most of the nations, not all of them. And there will be some concessions on both sides. But this is the long run. This is 50 years from now. Never, I'm basing my understanding upon historical patterns. There is no conflict in history that didn't end at the end. Some conflicts, took 200 years, some others 300 years. But at the end, those conflicts dissipated. Things are changing. Enemies are becoming friends, and friends are becoming enemies. This is a constant pattern worldwide. So we have always to take it into account when we try to foresee somehow the future. Of course, in the very short time, the other challenges are, and the challenges are great. And the other question was,
about your book,
publishing 2048. Well, as you probably are aware, if you have read my book, I was able to foresee the invasion to Ukraine. I was able to see the Arab Spring around in the Middle East and beyond. And the most, some of them, of course, have matured, those trends. In my book, I did not address the China conflict trends. And at that time, I was not aware of the graveness of that trend. And with some, I have an alibi because China has become China as we know it at the moment because of Xi Jinping when he took over in 2012. That's when China has shifted its its understanding of world affairs and decided to become a great power that will take over the world order of the 21st century. So that book in 2048, I have written it in 2009. It was published in Hebrew in 2010. In English, it was published in 2013. So at that time, I did not understand how China is going to be, even though there were a lot of studies speaking about it, but I didn't pay attention to that part of the world. Today, I'm putting a lot of efforts to understand the driving forces of China and how it's going to play out in the next decade or two.
Professor, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your insight with us. I hope we can check in the next few weeks and months as we see things develop. You gave us a lot to be scared of.
Thank you so much, but I don't understand. A lot of you are coming to Israel and not contacting me. That's not good.
Okay, you got it. Well,
for many years, I felt a part of the family. Now, I'm not feeling it anymore. What happened?
You got it. You're right. All right. I'm predicting that we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch a lot more often. Thank you. Thank you for being part of our family and and our friends.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Please send me the video, okay?
Okay.
By chance, we happen to have with us representatives of Kiryat Shmona Hesder Yeshiva. We visited them. They're not in Kiryat Shmona at present. The Army asked them to leave the area just before, in October. And they have about 250 students there. Almost half of them are in the Army right now, and they relocated some in central Israel. And actually, their location is probably the tallest area in Kiryat Shmona. So that's where the Army told them, please leave. We're afraid you're a target. Although in the last few months, 7,000 soldiers who are stationed up there are using yeshiva for showering, for sleeping, all types of different things. They moved out to central Israel. We visited there. They hosted us. It was very nice. They're coming back in about 2 months. We're trying to organize a committee to help them in their extra expenses they've had for this past year. This is Michael Natan. She's the executive director. Yair Atik, he was a student there. He was in our community for a couple of years in Bakai and other synagogues. So we'd like to thank them for coming, and hopefully when we come back, we'll be able to have something to help you out with. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.